Hello, everyone. Fiona here for kind of a special solo episode. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about why I started this podcast and where I am hoping to go from here. So, my name is Fiona Hatton. I'm 20. I'm a freshman in college in Massachusetts, and I play college hockey. We just wrapped up our first season, at least my first season, playing college, which was super exciting. My team had a great season. We ended up winning our conference for the third year in a row, and our program has only existed for 3 years. So that's some pretty good success right off the bat. And I was named Rookie of the Year for our conference, which I was really happy about. And after the season ended, I really started to do more stuff for my podcast. So I started this podcast in 2022 when I was a senior in high school. At that time, I was going through the recruiting process for college hockey and kind of like finishing the recruiting process, really, when you're a senior. And I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go to school and kind of what I wanted to do. And for the last couple of years at that point, I had been experiencing some anxiety just related to my sport and just life in general. And I felt like a lot of people weren't really talking about athlete mental health. And I thought that that was something that needed to be addressed. So that's where I started this podcast in the first place. 4 Minutes with Fiona began as kind of a mental health initiative just to help reduce the negative stigma around mental health in sports. So for a long time, I interviewed athletes. I started out with a lot of Division III athletes, and then I kind of worked my way up to some Division I athletes, and now I've talked to people who play professionally and internationally, etc. And I've kind of moved into talking to people outside of sports as well. So I'm going to get into some topics I like to cover. I really like to talk about identity. I like to talk about sports, success, like defining your success for yourself and figuring out what success means for you as an individual. I feel like that's a topic that not many people talk about, but it's something that I think is super interesting. And I think if you're going to live a life that's meaningful to you, you really need to define what success means to yourself. And I feel like that's something that I've done a lot of work in. I feel like I learn so much from every guest I talk to, which is one of the reasons I love having my podcast because I love learning new things and I especially love learning about self-development type stuff that I talk about on my podcast. Another thing we like to address is mindset in terms of sports. I feel like the mind can be really helpful or harmful for an athlete, and learning how to manage your emotions and manage yourself effectively is super important if you're an athlete, but also if you're not. Another thing I really like to bring up is kind of the identity shift that happens once you stop playing competitive sports. And I have talked to a lot of psychologists. I talked to some people that work with Hidden Opponent about the transition out of sports. And I know that's something a lot of people struggle with. So I really hope to talk more about that in the future. I'm trying to think of some other things I address. I like to talk about authenticity a lot. I recently had Michaela Boyle on, and we talked about kind of how she's become her more authentic self. And I feel like authenticity is something that I've been leaning into recently. I'm really into Brene Brown, and she talks a lot about authenticity and kind of releasing perfectionism and thinking along those lines. And I feel like a lot of people don't talk about how hard it is to be authentic sometimes, but how life-changing it can be to really be authentic to who you are. It kind of feels like you're taking off a mask and just pursuing what you want to pursue. And I think it can be really hard for a lot of people, but it can really transform your life for the better. So if you haven't listened to that episode with Michaela, you should definitely do that. And I'm definitely planning on talking more about authenticity in the future. As for myself, besides this podcast, I play college hockey. I'm a computer science and communications major. I like to volunteer. I really hope to coach at the collegiate level one day in hockey. So I volunteer for people in my hometown in Alaska. I helped out with the girls program there for a long time. There's not very many people in general that play hockey in my hometown, but especially girls. So I really tried to help recruit a lot more girls. And this summer, I'm really hoping to do either a hockey camp or try and start a mentorship program for the girls in my hometown because I feel like that's a super great way to give back. I feel like as a collegiate athlete, I am super privileged and lucky to be able to play hockey. It's an expensive sport, and I've had a lot of people supporting me, and I do have a lot of people supporting me now. So I think it's important to try and give back to the next generation and really anyone I can. So I'll probably talk more about that on this podcast. I talked to Alyssa Sleesman, who has been in hockey for a long time, and that was one of the things we talked about, how important it is to give back. If you're an athlete and are kind of in a position of privilege where you're more well off than other people. So that was also a really great episode if you're interested in that. I feel like I'm kind of wrapping up here, but I hope this little episode gave you a better idea of who I am and kind of what I'm trying to do with this. And if you know of anyone who you think would be a great guest, or you yourself think you would be a good guest, please pitch yourself, DM me on Instagram, or you can email me, and I would love to hear from you. If you have listened to my podcast for a while and you love it, leaving a review would help me a lot. It helps this show reach more people and help more people, which is really just what I'm trying to do with this show in general. That's kind of my why. I just want to help people with mental health, with authenticity, really with anything kind of life related. So that is that. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Hope you have a great month, and I will see you next time on 4 Minutes with Fiona.